Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Masterclass held by Valdo Spumanti. I'd like to thank the people here, people who managed to wake up this morning, get up this morning to come and listen from us here in Milan, and especially our friends who are listening to us from Moscow and Tokyo. I'm Emiliana Ferma, who's in charge of the Russian and Japanese markets on behalf of Valdo. Now we have the chief winemaker of Valdo and engineering director. And we're going to discuss Valdo Spumanti. We're going to start from our local area. Valdo is firmly based in the area of Prosecco. Our area is very important, and somehow that you can also tell from our name. Valdo is a nickname of Valdobbiadene, this small town which is the heart of the Prosecco production area. Valdo is a family-owned business. We're now in the third generation of owners. And this family has heavily invested in both the winery and the innovation in every respect, and I will illustrate that later on. But still, we are fully rooted in our production area. From 2019 on, the Valdobbiadene Hills have been recognized as part of the UNESCO World Heritage List. And I would like to leave the floor to the person next to me at some point, someone who was born here and has lived on these hills. Well, yes, I was born, I live, and I have always lived on the hills of Valdobbiadene, and we feel that what we see on the screen is a good representation of the place where we live on a daily basis. It's a unique terroir, a unique area where human action has shaped the landscape for centuries, if not millennia. And so we've followed the altitude levels in planting our vineyards, which now look as embroideries on hillsides. The area is totals up 8,000 hectares of vineyards, as well as 11,000 hectares of woodland. So it's a unique area that I would encourage everyone to visit, because it's only by coming and seeing firsthand that you can really understand what's going on here. Okay, that's all very true. Let's talk about history. Let's go back many years in time. Everything started in 1826. We're talking about approximately 200 years in history. Valdo, 100 years ago, was one of the founders of the Prosecco designation. In 1926, small-scale local entrepreneurs decided to turn Glera and other local varietals into spumantes like Pinchetta grapes, alongside Glera. Now, they initially established the Società Anonima Vini Superiori, SAVS, and these pictures make me smile. I mean, Prosecco many years back was primarily associated to local consumption. Gianfranco, correct me if I'm wrong. It was the area of Valdobbiadene, and there was wine sent to the Venetian Republic. They would like to purchase their wines in the area of Cadore, and they would also buy still wines, the so-called Ombretta of Venice. And here we see the early century bottling lines, which is not what you have now, which is a high-performance bottling line. And they would make the still wines, they would make the sparkling wines, and that tells you a lot about how much progress has happened during history. The real step forward, however, happened in the early 1930s, and it was a Veronese family that was already in the wine business, and it was the Bolla family. Sergio Bolla was someone who was long-sighted, and so he understood the interest of investing in Savis, the Società Anonima Vini Superiore, and he thought of developing that winery, and everything started with a name change. So Savis was turned into Valdo Spumanti, Valdo being, again, the nickname for Valdo Biadene. Valdo is also easy to pronounce, and also it identifies a specific area and adds value in view of promotion. But Sergio Bolla, who was also the father of our current president, Pierluigi Bolla, he invested heavily, first of all, in the people, the sales force, saying we believe that these bubblies have a future, and so we're going to promote them from the restaurant system and expanding that to retail distribution, supermarkets, so forth and so on. And that was done step by step, starting from the 1960s. Now, the 1980s. Now, I am particularly interested in that particular period from a sales perspective, although I hadn't been born yet. That was the decade when they started exporting the wines to the DACH countries, Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, and then the US, and then all the way to our Japanese friends. 1981. The innovation starts at Valdo Spumanti, and key intuitions were deployed between Sergio Bolla and Pierluigi Bolla. So the idea of Prosecco as we know it today was developed in those years. Now, many people call Prosecco Prosecchino. There are a few people who still talk about Prosecchino, with the idea of a cuvée that was introduced. They wanted to do away with the Prosecchino, which is like, you know, a little Prosecco, a little glass of Prosecco, and demonstrate that Prosecco could be a fantastic, a fabulous wine to pair with an entire meal, not just a wine for an aperitif. So Valdo Biadene is the Ox Valley, and it's an area where you have a very specific climate and subsoil that imparts very specific sensory profiles to the products that are grown here. And our products from 1981 on were largely spumantes made with a finesse, and coming from that territory, they were cuvées that went well on an entire meal. 1994, Cuvée del Fondatore, that's one of the nearest products. So the Cuvée del Fondatore is, again, a Prosecco that is for connoisseurs. And Gianfranco will tell us more about it. We'll discover it little by little. So don't reveal too much from the outstart. So we're going to talk again about the Cuvée del Fondatore. So the residual sugar is lower than the previously created Cuvée di Boy, and so it contains 10% Chardonnay on top of the glera, and it is barrique aged, so that makes it more complex in terms of texture. And again, this reinforces our role, the role that we have assigned to the Cuvée del Fondatore, to this wine, as a wine for an entire meal. Now, with the Cuvée del Fondatore, they introduced the idea of the long Charmat. Now, Cuvée du Bois takes 5 months in the pressure tanks. Cuvée del Fondatore is aged in the pressure tank for 12 months with a Charmat fermentation. So that leads to smaller bubbles. So there's no big bubble exploding on your palate, but that is more of a caressing bubble that we have. So let's fast forward to 2004. Innovation is back again. Now, Numero 10 was created. The goal here for the entire technical team and also for our president, Pierluigi Bolla, the goal again was to demonstrate that Glera was and is a very versatile varietal. We know that 99% of Prosecco is produced as a Charmat fermented wine. This is a Valdo Prosecco Superiore DOCG, which is a Champenois Metodo Classico. It spends only 10 months on the lees, not to compromise the fruit and floral hints of the Glera. And it is a product that was highly innovative. And it was very much appreciated by the market. And we have our Moscow friends. I can see you, but I know you're there. Before the end of 2018, we had planned a blind tasting in central Moscow with experts and SOMs, particularly, tasting 4 different vintages of Numero 10. The feedback was just spectacular because no one would have expected 100% Glera Metodo Classico. So there was a wonderful feedback. I think it's a limited production, so it's in the order of 8,000 bottles per year, but it is a testimony to the fact that Valdo keeps innovating. Before 2009, when the regulations had not been defined in detail, and even more before that period, Prosecco didn't have a specific rule book. Nowadays, to produce a Prosecco, so that on the front label you can write Prosecco, you have to have a minimum of 85%, whether DOC or DOCG, of Glera grapes. Now, this development was thought of in order to create a trade-up in terms of category, but with the idea of bringing to our audience the original recipe of when Prosecco was produced without too much regulation behind it. So we came up with this innovation, this product called Origine, new sparkling wine, inspired by the old blend of Prosecco. And so we innovated it in terms of fluid inside the bottle, as well the bottle and the packaging as a whole. 2018, thinking of the environment, Valdo became increasingly green, so we started producing our first organic Prosecco, a Prosecco that has wonderful characteristics, especially in the glass, with a unique minerality in the DOC category. And then 2020 is simply a year when a lot of our philosophies were confirmed. Our baby product became the best-selling Prosecco in Italy and in many international markets, including Germany. And that was Marca Oro, which was one of our first products. Now, Valdo today. So I have described how we got from the beginning to what we are now. And I would like now Gianfranco explained what he does at the winery in order to create a sound basis for Valdo's future. Now, of course, clearly, a winery philosophy needs nowadays to be grounded in sustainability. And I think that sustainability must be expressed through the corporate culture rather than in communications towards the outside world. It is only a corporate culture and the knowledge and competence of the people in the company being turned towards sustainability. Only if that happens can that bring to bear in real terms. Of course, we have a sustainability that is associated with our responsibility vis-à-vis the local community. We are in the center, in the historical center of Valdo, which has actually grown around the winery in the course of time. Now, of course, we have to comply with the regulations and also be responsible and virtuous in saving raw materials, the packaging, the water, the recycling materials, and every action we carry out. We need to think of what we are doing in sustainability terms. As we say in Italy, you don't throw away anything of the pig. So when you kill a pig, when you slaughter a pig, everything can be put to good use. And the same happens with the grapes. You can make fertilizers and other agricultural products whereby we recover all the raw materials all the way to the lees and the yeasts. Now, we've also optimized energy consumption. We have now installed in our vinification plant that you see bottom right, a photovoltaic plant that is going to cover approximately 80% of our energy requirements. So this is our mantra and the way we operate on a daily basis. So again, from my perspective, we needed to first implement that sustainability culture in-house because that will have reflections on the outside in the longer term. We needed to create a team of people who are all oriented to the same goal. Now, obviously, we've been doing that for the past 20 years with our growers. Our growers are assisted by agronomists paid by Valdo, and this consulting activity goes on throughout the year. And in recent years, that has been our way to encourage them to evolve to SQNP, which is the national quality system, which is symbolized by a logo with a bee in it. That is the hallmark of a sustainability effort. Now, let me now introduce to you Gianfranco Zanon. Okay, Gianfranco. Who is Gianfranco Zanon, our winemaker who is with us today? Gianfranco is someone who was born and grew up in the area of Valdo Biadene, actually in Valdo Biadene itself. He is a winemaker with over 25 years under his belt. He joined the team at Valdo, bringing something that in the viticultural and winemaking field is a unique thing, which is passion and engagement in the production of bubblies. So, as I keep saying, we are not producing bricks and mortar, we are producing a philosophy, and at least we all strive to do that. Now, Gianfranco is bringing his passion to work, and he conveys that passion to his entire team. So you'll have an opportunity to taste a horizontal flight of Proseccos that interpret that passion. Now, Emiliano has already introduced himself. You will have understood that he is a great communicator, not just a salesperson. And at our winery, he is doing the right kind of communications, especially towards the markets, be they domestic or international. And so he is very good at communicating with everyone who wants to approach our wines. Okay, and he is working hard every day to do better and better. And he is also someone who knows how to listen. Listening is of the utmost importance. And I learn a lot, for instance, when people ask me questions. So I would like you to ask me questions by the end of this presentation, because that's what helps me understand where the criticalities are. So that's all very good experience, and I'm very experienced, as you can see. He means he's old. Let's now start the tasting. We have a 9 Spumanti flight, 9 bubblies. It's almost the right time of the day. I keep saying that the best time to taste our bubblies is from 11 a.m. to 12:30, because the stomach is empty and you're ready, you're curious to find out. While after lunch, the brain is sort of going into a standby mode. That's part of how the human body works. So you are not so attentive, so not so curious about what's in the glass. Now, Gianfranco, let's talk about what we said last night. We should congratulate the organization about the glasses. I was worried at the beginning because I thought that these could be too wide for a sparkling wine, but actually they're just perfect, I found out. It helps the bubbles to develop, and also from a sensory perspective, it is absolutely the perfect kind of glass. Okay, I think we should get the ball rolling. The first wine is our bestseller, and it is a brand in a brand. It's the Marca Oro. It is a good reference for Valdo and for the Conegliano Valdobbiadene designation. It's a wine that Valdo has been producing ever since the 1950s, and it is a good exemplification of the Conegliano Valdobbiadene. It is an extra dry, so slightly mellow, with a residual sugar of 15 grams per liter on average, 11 degrees alcohol by volume, and it is typical of what you get as a Valdobbiadene Spumante. This version works well as an aperitif, and it can introduce any moment of conviviality. It can be enjoyed at any time of the day, but actually somehow it can also draw us closer to the enjoyment. I mean, it can be a good accompaniment for a tidbit, for an appetizer. It is simple but elegant at the same time, and very enjoyable, very pleasant. On the whole, you find floral as well as fruity sensations, and the sugar counterbalances these sensations quite effectively. This is the most common kind of Valdobbiadene style. 70% of the Conegliano Valdobbiadene bottles are extra dry spumantes. 20-25% are brutes, and only 5 to 6% are dry, therefore sweeter. First of all, I'd like to have a toast with you. Thank you for being here. Bubbles are joy, and perhaps we haven't been so joyful in recent months, but this is a comeback to conviviality, and I think we can go back to our conviviality in a near future. To the palate, there is a correspondence to the nose, and that's a requirement for the sparkling wines of this kind. You have to have a right correspondence between the nose and the mouth through the aftertaste. And that's only normal if the Spumanti is made in the right way. It has the right harmony, and it's been processed the right way with the right kind of balance. And a correspondence between all these aspects is absolutely important. I don't know if you want to add anything, Emiliano. Well, what I would like to say is that Marca Oro is a very recognizable wine at the global level. People who taste Marca Oro, people who approach Marca Oro will recognize how typical Valdobbiadene as a Valdobbiadene it is. It has this fruit, yellow fruit, and pears, and that is the typical Valdobbiadene, whether it is tasted in Russia, Japan, Norway, or anywhere else. Marca Oro is recognizable everywhere, and that is its unique strength. In terms of style, in the past 30 years, especially after the 1990s, it was breaking away from the tradition. I mean, you had either metodo classico or sweet spumante made from Moscato, for instance. So this style wasn't so available in the 1970s, for instance, and its introduction changed our habits, the happy hour habits. Generally, what was the rule in happy hours in the past was innovated with the introduction of this aperitif. This is the right aperitif, the right wine for any aperitif. And that is an important moment of our daily conviviality. Now, to connect to the next bottle, now, Marca Oro, on many markets, including the Russian market, was a door opener. The next bottle is Barbozza. Barbozza is a very specific, very special spumante that needs to be promoted in a special way, and it needs to be placed at the hands of people who can explain it adequately. So, for instance, on the Russian market, we are growing a lot, not in terms of volumes, but in terms of quality and quality distribution. So that process was only possible thanks to Marca Oro. Marca Oro was the icebreaker that introduced other variations of Valdobbiadene Prosecco Superiore. That again made it possible for us to introduce into some markets that were new to Valdobbiadene Prosecco, for instance, our Rive di San Pietro di Barbozza. The one that we're serving now is 2018. In this case, it's an extra brut, but actually it's a Pas d'Oseille. Dosage zero, so it is at the other end of the spectrum compared to the first wine that we have presented. So it is another tool in our toolbox to bring to our consumers so that they can understand that our glera, when picked in the Rive, and I'll expand on what that is, also yields an interesting product, despite the fact it is very different. So the Rive are the steep vineyards that lend themselves to making a vintage wine without any residual sugar. This is a wine that has spent 9 months in Charmat fermentation, and it's spent another year in the bottle. It's a way to tell the consumer that glera provides fresh and very pleasant spumantes, and that will always be its winning variations, but there are also many other nuances that you can discover to tell different stories and to give a more comprehensive picture of what Valdobbiadene can be. So again, the Riva is a good representation of what's so special about our UNESCO hills, that is the steep slopes. Now, I mean, look at the bubbles. There's a big difference in terms of finesse and elegance now in the transition from Marca Oro to Rive. And we're going to taste Cuvée del Fondatore as well. So now compare the bubbles. That's very important for a spumante maker. Now, this Rive di San Pietro di Barbozza is a dosage 0, so you don't have the fruity sensation, because that's what is coming with sugar. And therefore, you have a floral sensation, and especially the minerality stands out. The sapid taste, the elegance, the finesse. Perhaps it's less refined in terms of roundness of the product, but it is very interesting to discover this product because it's so different. Okay, I'm being told that we should speed up. Here's our third wine. It's yet another totally different wine. And this is a Prosecco DOC 100% Glera, made from organic certified Glera grapes. You know that this certification process requires that you tend the vineyards in a very strict way, and also that the grapes are dealt with in a very special way also at the winery. You cannot choose any crop protection treatments in terms of agrochemicals, and you cannot choose any synthetic products. We only use organic certified products as well to improve the fertility, as well as copper and sulfur to kill the pests. It's all permitted substances when it comes to organic cultivation. You know that organic farming, especially at our latitudes in northern Italy more generally, leads to lower yields per hectare. And that is the case with us too. But that is a philosophy that you need to go for at all costs. And that, however, the flip side of that is that on certain years you have very low production levels. But that is where we should all be going with our DOC and DOCG wines. I keep saying that it will be hard for us to have all our production organic certified. But that is an objective. Nevertheless, we need to be respectful to our community too, because we have people's homes in the middle of our vineyards, and it's very important that we take good care of the health of our community. Now, the one that we are tasting today is a Brut with residual sugar of around 15 grams per liter. So the sensations are wildflowers, acacia and jasmine primarily, and also citrus fruit. And as Emiliano pointed out, it has a lot of minerality, which is particularly perceptible on the palate, perceivable on the palate. Maybe it is just a coincidence, but on the Russian and Japanese markets, we're trying to build something relevant and interesting around this product, which is a bio, that is organic certified product. So, and there's a very interesting feedback to this organic certification. People try it and then buy it again. They appreciate what's so specific about this product. Now, if you have tasted other DOC Proseccos, you will be able to tell the difference in terms of complexity, for instance. Now, we were talking about Marca Oro as our door opener or icebreaker, but the DOC was also a door opener for wines like our organic certified or Tenuta alla Maredana. Of course, organic wines will develop further in the coming years. Consumers keep thinking of organic wines as products with a lower quality level or, that are not really what they look like, that are not entirely transparent. But actually, that's not the case. Now, what we do at Tenuta alla Maredana, we have introduced another innovation that is very important for a winery like Valdo. We are sort of tying back to our terroirs of the Prosecco designation. We have a collaboration with a very important winery in the area of Treviso, so we have taken a stake in that winery, and in cooperation with them, 2 years ago and last year, we have produced two special Spumantes, a Prosecco DOC and a Prosecco Rosé last year. Today we're presenting the Prosecco DOC, which is produced from the grapes grown at La Maredana. Now, you know that in the rule book of Prosecco DOC, there's up to 15% of international varietals such as white Pinot, Bianco, Pinot Gris, as well as Pinot Nero and Chardonnay. To characterize this production that comes from this estate exclusively, called La Maredana in the province of Treviso, we have added to this wine 10% Pinot Nero from the previous harvest. So we have 90% Glera and 10% Pinot Noir. That is meant to make this wine a bit special. From a business as well as winemaking perspective, it is in our interest to bring very different and very recognizable products to our consumers, so that even the consumers who are not so experienced can tell the difference between products and enjoy the diversity. Now, think of how many nuances you can have in a single DOC. And La Maredana and the organic certified wines are two good examples of what I'm saying. And this 10% of Pinot Noir is very recognizable in the wine, in the depth and persistence. Of course, Glera is a wine that is easy, straightforward, and that will be its interest also moving forward. But the Pinot Nero is making it more complex, more enjoyable, and that makes our La Maredana wine for starters and also for the entire meal. Okay, the next step is a Cuvée del Fondatore devoted to Sergio Bolla, the founder of the Valdo winery in the 1930s. This is a Spumante which aims at being very recognizable and distinctive, but also to approach differently the consumption of Conegliano Valdobbiadene Spumantes with a more international slant. Okay, let's start from the color. We are now tasting the 2019 vintage, which is the latest to have been released. There is a proportion of Chardonnay produced in the Conegliano Valdobbiadene, which was passed around 6 months, spent around 6 months in 300-liter barriques before it was aged in a pressure tank. So the Chardonnay, the fact that it's been through the tonneau and the long fermentation to make secondary fermentation imparted a very special set of characteristics. You know that the rule book is pretty strict and you can't really do much because, of course, a rule book is a regulation that you need and it's a good idea to comply with it. But we've tried to play around within whatever it was possible to do as part of the regulation to diversify our tastes. You have white flowers and wisteria hints in this wine with a touch, a very delicate touch of vanilla and fresh brioche, which gives you a very different sensation. So it's a Prosecco for connoisseur, for people who have already been exposed to different Proseccos and different nuances of the Prosecco. We brought two new products to the Russian market. We went there with Marca Oro, of course, and then Cuvée del Fondatore. And it was our intention to entirely depart from the habit of presenting the very simple, very straightforward, very classic products. And in the course of time, that paid back because we've become known by consumers as a winery that stands out from the pack, that is also doing something different from the traditional Prosecco DOC. So that was very, very good, and we benefited from it in terms of image. And Mr. Pierluigi Bolla keeps repeating this mantra on an everyday basis. He keeps telling us, of course, we wanted to make convivial spumantes, straightforward spumantes, and that will still be our core business moving forward. But we can also have products that age in the bottle, and there are more long-lived, have some aging potential to differentiate ourselves from the rest of the Proseccos, and that is the idea behind the Cuvée del Fondatore. This bottle, if you drink it in 2-3 years, you will still get a lot of satisfaction. It will still be very, very interesting and rewarding. Okay, next wine. This is like a one-off Valdo Prosecco. It's a metodo classico, the traditional method, our numero 10, literally number 10. It's a metodo classico that is bottle fermented, as every metodo classico, that will. And it's called number 10 because it got 10 out of 10 marks when we tasted it. And we have 100% glera, and it can last longer because of its relatively long aging in the bottle. That characterizes this Spumanti as being very different from the previous ones. This is not Chardonnay, nor Pinot Noir, nor Pinot Meunier. This is glera, and it's a pretty outstanding. So if you have an opportunity, buy a bottle, forget it in your cellar and taste it after 3-4 years. The evolution of the product would just be fabulous. The color, the bouquet. The bouquet is very reminiscent of glera, the white flowers and everything we know about glera. But then you have this very delicate hint, which is not very impactful, I have to say. It's very, very delicate. Of bread crust, and also a very delicate note of zest. And it's all made within the rule book. We're not departing from it. So these are wines that become even more interesting when you forget them in the cellar. And Emiliano is opening old bottles. We have all the vintages after 2004. Actually, we have skipped a few years since 2004, which was the first year when we produced it. He gets a few bottles just to compare our metodo classico with other designations such as Trento DOC, Franciacorta, Champagne, of course, not the most aged, but in blind tastings we get surprises because the final consumer, and all of us, including myself, when we don't see the label, we're not influenced by the label, and so we give our judgment based on our perceptions. And that's what works well. I like it, I don't. And then the magical question, which is, if this wine is the one you'd be ready to buy, how much would you pay for it? Of course, my answer would be, it depends, says Emiliano, whether it's Russia or Japan or anywhere else. So it's a wine that we thought was very surprising when we tasted it at the winery in these blind tastings. Okay, I'll tell you a trick, something that sets Glera apart from the international varietals, be it Chardonnay or Pinot Noir, is that also in long agings, if it's well made and if it's well preserved, because the way in which you store them is all important, the temperature, the humidity. It's light wines, they don't have a big structure, 11% ABV. They needed to be consumed quickly within the second year of life, but they can last much longer if you keep them in the right temperature conditions. If you store them in a place where it's too warm, like 30 degrees, or you have big swings in temperature, it's not going to work. If you keep it in a cellar at 15 degrees, it's the ideal thing. So if you have a chance to buy a numero 10 bottle, keep it in your cellar and then taste it after 3-4 years. Every time we taste the old bottles, it's very surprising. Now we have a few interesting vintages. 2011 is already ready for enjoyment. 2014 was just a very strange It was a very strange year, very cool, very rainy, so we had a lot of acidity. The ripening was harder to achieve, the maturity was harder to achieve, so it has more length in the wine, and also it's a wine that's very long-lived. So you needed to know what's what, but 2014 is out of the box and still very good to taste. Okay, next bottle is Origine. It's a bottle that has a very special packaging with a silk-screened bottle, a front and label, front and back. And it's a reflection of the original logo of Valdo. It's a logo that is in reference to the Belle Époque, the 1930s, where people were ready to party because the First World War had just come to an end, and so maybe also after a pandemic, people will be ready to party again, and we're seeing that because we're selling a lot, luckily enough. So it was a new way to interpret an old winemaking style applied to Glera. This is a Spumanti, Brut. It's not a DOC. It has more aromatic sensations, more complex, and it's not so refined and elegant as the previous wines. It's especially the first Spumanti we tasted, but it has more complexity because of this higher proportion of slightly more aromatic varietals that convey this sensation. From a commercial perspective, it was a crown jewel for Valdo, actually. This is a generic Spumanti. Legally, we cannot call this anything but Spumanti Brut. I don't like to call it a generic Spumanti, but that's what it is. I mean, it bears no designation, and it has been an opportunity to bring some upscaling in the Spumanti categories, and we did so on many markets. Since we're not selling our products based on price solely, but we approach the markets in a different way. It takes longer to introduce our products, but when the trade players and the consumers understand the approach and what is behind these products, well, then they will buy into this philosophy. The product development in this case was very successful in certain markets, Russia, Japan, the Asian markets, but also including the Italian and European markets. This has become one of our best sellers in the way of Spumanti. And this product is also a representation of the owners of the company to convey the message about the brand. Of course, the designation is important, but the brand is essential these days for Prosecco wines. And contrary to our cousins in the area of Champagne, we do not have, unfortunately, such strong brands that stand out from the crowd, and valuable brands, especially, because it would be good for them and it would be good for the designation if we had them. We needed to communicate about the value of the area where it's so hard to grow the grapes and make the wines. And that can only be achieved by communicating about the designation, but also communicating about the prominent brands. And where you have big designations, there should be big names of individual wineries too. Now, in a promotional perspective, from a promotional perspective, and also to encourage experimentation, we have started a Valdo bar in Moscow, where there's an opportunity, especially for our Russian friends, to taste all the wines made by Valdo. And it was a very good place where to plan for tastings, virtually initially, but now that will go. That will move to in-person tastings very soon. Okay, we'll continue the tasting with a brand new wine for the Prosecco DOC designation after its inclusion in the rulebook and 2 years of studies prior to that, and also a lot of debate inside the Prosecco designation. Well, we released our Prosecco DOC Rosé Brut. You know that it takes a long time to include new wines, new styles in any designation rulebook. So since last October, we admitted this rosé version. In the rulebook, there was a possibility, even before this, to use Pinot Noir as a second varietal. And we had to modify the rulebook so that Pinot Noir could not only be vinified as white wine, but also as a red wine. So up to a proportion of 15%, we can use a Pinot Noir vinified as a red wine to make this rosé with our glera. The traceability of the product is very important, and we decided also to indicate the fact that it is a vintage wine, and we also had to include an indication of the vintage. For Prosecco DOC Rosé, it is compulsory to indicate more information, and the release can happen from the January the 1st of the year following the harvest. And it needs to be to spend at least 30 days in a pressurized tank to be called a Prosecco. Since we allow the Charmat method to unfold in the pressurized tanks for at least 60 days, but more normally on average 120 days, we decided to allow this wine to rest on the lees for at least 90 days. This wine is now presented as a brut, which is the best combination of the glera characteristics with the characteristics of Pinot Noir. Pinot Noir has a proportion of 15% in this wine, and it's cold soaked to create this particular color, which is a light rose pink. It is characterized by the two varietals, the floral sensations combined with the wild strawberries. Now, this year there has been a boom in the sales of this product across all international markets, as well as Italy, of course. We're talking about the British market, Russian market, South African market, and many markets in Asia. Hopefully the trend will continue, and that will make the Prosecco range even richer in general. Now, of course, there will be many wineries that will create rosés as premium wines. We expect that to happen. We are all very happy of this trend that is favoring rosé wines. Rosé wines sales are growing in double digits. Last wine in the flight. I hope this wasn't too long. But anyway, we have another rosé, which is an exclusive of Valdo, and it's essentially the same idea as what we've said in the rest of the morning. It's a no designation rosé, where Nerello Mascalese is the main varietal. For many years we have entertained relations with a Sicilian grower making Nerello Mascalese, which is an indigenous, a native grape of Sicily, which is very reminiscent of Pinot Noir. And also in terms of growing patterns and the physiology of the bunch, etc., it is very reminiscent of Pinot Nero. And it is also adapted to the growing techniques of Sicily, which has developed in the course of centuries. That has been prevalent in the domestication of this plant, which is similar to ivy. It's a climber that was then placed on espaliers to improve the quality of the grapes and their ripening process. In this case, it's a rosé, which is a blend of approximately 70% Nerello Mascalese and 30% Glera. So it's a marriage of north and south, the north and the south of Italy. 10 to 11% grams per liter of sugar, and it's 11.5 ABV. It's an extra dry. And the sensations, because of the prevalence of red grapes, is warmer, so to speak, compared to the other bubblies. It's very round, and it has a very persistent bead, and the sensations are also lingering. Now, we've been talking about the innovation as applied to products. This floral, named Paradise, is an innovation. We combined a Sicilian varietal, one that is typical and grows in a particularly warm area, with Glera, which is an easy drinking varietal. This is a very important innovation that was made possible by colleagues who are here in the audience, that led to a totally different approach. The bottle is covered by a sleeve designed by C.C. Johnson, a New York artist, who gave it a very floral, very lively and eco-positive image. And it was a big success internationally on several markets. in markets that are generally difficult to approach, such as South Africa, where they make lots of wines. And it was fantastic to see the positive feedback, especially from the female audience. It's a rosé. It is a very trendy product, but it is very, very elegant, nevertheless. So we're almost good with timekeeping. Okay. Okay, I think and hopefully you enjoyed the tasting. We've tasted different facets of the Valdo Spumanti making potential and our ability to use different varietals with different proportions and different characteristics, different production methodologies, different hues, different colors, different everything. We're here to take your questions, if any. Thank you very much for listening so attentively. Now, would anyone ask questions out of Russia or Japan? We're far away, but we could just come closer if you asked us questions. Okay, we see that the room is full, and we like to see that. From Moscow or Tokyo, are there any questions from you? Or we might get a question from our brand ambassador who is in the audience. Okay, unless you have questions, I think... No questions? Are you okay? No, there's one. There's a question from Tokyo. They're writing the question right now. I'll get it in a few seconds, I think. Now, if you want a translation into Japanese, don't worry. We have everything it takes here in Milan. Our brand ambassador is here. Okay, as Gianfranco is saying, it has to be a long question. Okay, it's a bit late. It's a delayed question. Okay. Okay. To our Russian friends, we hope we'll be able to visit Russia very soon. Hi, Moscow. Well, in Moscow and in Tokyo, I've always met people who are really experienced in they're connoisseurs of wine, and that is why in these two countries particularly, it's hard for us to promote spumantes like Numero 10, Fondatore and Rive, because in the other hand, well, sorry, we don't have a hard time marketing these products, Fondatore, Numero 10 and Rive, because there are so many connoisseurs that know what's what, that it's not complicated to sell these bottles that are a bit more demanding in terms of skills and competencies. Now, from Tokyo, the question is, will you make a product in the future that has a direct reference to its terroir, like Cartizze? Well, we already have Rive. We presented it today. Perhaps this wasn't clear enough when we explained it. And it comes from two individual vineyards from San Pietro di Barbozza, which is a hamlet, part of the municipality of Valdo, where we have full traceability. We also have Tenuta la Maredana that comes from a single vineyard where we had a partnership with this estate. We are also in the process of launching a product that comes from the Valdo vineyards, which is a 24-month metodo classico called Vigna Pradase. So we do have some products in our range that are already a reflection of what you're asking for. And I think we have a few more projects that will bring to bear soon. We have among our growers people who will be able to give us grapes that will lead to the production of single vineyards and individual estates. Now, if that was specific about Cartizze, Valdo is the largest Cartizze producer because to us, as you can well understand, quality is all important. Now, because Cartizze has a price point that is very different from the rest of the Prosecco, the first market for our Cartizze is the Italian market. However, it also sells well in countries like Russia, where Cartizze is a Valdobbiadene Prosecco Superiore DOCG that is well known, and there's a big demand for it. So we have a Cuvée Viviana, which was dedicated to our founder's wife, Mrs. Viviana Bolla. And it is a product that is made in limited volumes, but it is pretty unique, and it has the special characteristics of the wines produced on the hill of Cartizze, 107 hectares. It's a limited production, and so we don't have many big volumes of them. And in recent years, we sell all our stocks before the following vintage becomes available. Because of the history of Cartizze as part of the designation, we were the second winery in the Valdobbiadene, the second in the Prosecco area, and the first in Valdobbiadene. We also have a Cartizze in our range. So thank you very much for listening. It was a real pleasure meeting you. Thank you all on our side.